Okay, Algebra 2, starting a new chapter, Chapter 7, working with radicals. You can see in this box in lesson 7.1, in this unit, we assume the variable represents a positive real number. Very important, so whenever you see y or x, it's representing a positive real number. And here's a little introduction, an introduction to simplifying a radical expression with an even exponent. Now, if we were to take the square root of y to the 14th, we're really saying y to some power multiplied to itself would be y to the 14th. Anybody have a guess as to what that might be? Y to the, think about it, 7th is correct. Here's why. If you took y to the 7th times y to the 7th, this is when you'd add the powers up. But more to the point, and this can be done so quickly, one thing I really want to make sure you guys know is, and this is going to become more and more of an issue this chapter, is that at least for right now, the only radicals we've really looked at was the square root. There's an understood index of 2, and it's as if you're dividing 14 by 2. You could think of it that way. And that's really cool. Now, you can always double check by saying, hey, would y to the 7th multiply to itself to get you y to the 14th? It does, and then you're good to go. Now, as you're looking here, hopefully you remember what the square root of 36 is. If you don't, you can always use your calculator. What is the square root of 36? It's a 6. But from what we've just seen, what do you think the square root of z to the 4th is? Z to the 2. It's like we're taking 4 divided by 2 here. And, of course, z squared times z squared, you'd add those powers, you'd get z to the 4th. Here's where it gets more interesting. Look at this problem. For the first time this year, maybe the first time in an algebra class altogether, you're looking at a radical that's not just a square root. This is a 5th root. Now, understandably, kids could figure this out without a calculator. I want to say that from the beginning. You could just logically say what number times itself 5 times is 243. And you could guess and check and say, well, it wouldn't be a 2 because 2 multiplied to itself repeatedly would be even. And here's the thing, though. Sometimes kids will wonder if there is a 5th root on your calculator. You won't see it on your faceplate here. But what you have to do is always type the index first. Type a 5 with your TI-84. And then when you hit math, this math button, you can see where the down arrow is. If you were to go down to number 5, the x root, and this can really help you out this chapter, guys. First, you type in the index, what type of root you want to have. Then you type the x root. Now, notice what happens as soon as you click enter. You just see the 5th root showing up. So this is actually really, really cool. It allows you to do any type of a root that you'd want to do. Oh, 243. By the way, I mistyped that. Second enter will just bring that right back. Everything will be a whole number today, guys. Everything's going to be a whole number. You shouldn't get any decimals anyway. So this would actually be a 3. Now, you could have just guessed and checked. You could have just said, well, obviously, what number times itself 5 times would get you 243? Eventually, you'd come to a 3, and it wouldn't take you too long. But what do you think the 5th root of w to the 30 is? W to the 6th. We said before we could divide. We can take 30 divided by that index, and that's w to the 6. Okay, so that's a real cool way, fast way to be able to do these problems. Okay, as we keep going, like I said, you wanted to have your calculator out for a table. And you could do this without a graphing calculator by plugging in the numbers 8, 9, 25, and 34 into this function. It's just that the table will let you do it fast and real simple. So let me show you how I would recommend that you do it. Get your calculator up. I'll even clear the screen. Go to y equals. Now your y equals is really what f of x is. I'm going to go square root, so I'll go second, and then come to this x squared button. You can see that's how you get a square root. You have to hit that second button to get the blue, at least my faceplate's in blue. Then we get the square root, and we'll type x minus 9. We want to make sure all of that's in the radical, and it is. From here, guys, is we are going to just double check our second table set. You'll see that we're on auto. I want second window just to double check that. Okay, and well, it was just hitting second and then window. Okay, I'm just double checking that it's there. You might wonder if you could go to ask instead. You could. I'm going to show you that this is a cool thing where you can just change this to ask. So I want second window. Then you can go to ask. Why is this cool? I'll show you. You don't have to scroll as much. When you go to second table, you type in what you want to see. Now, so I went to the ask mode. Now, if you were just on, the regular setting on the auto, you'd have to scroll, but you get an error. Now, the error, you're going to, on Alex, collect not a real number, right? If you're getting an error, that's more or less saying you can't take the square root of a negative. Then what? Well, you can type in a 9, and this time you get a 0. You could type in 25, and this time you can see you'd get a 4. You could type in 34, and then you get a 5. Now, every now and again, kids will say, well, I don't want to do the ask mode. I just want to do auto. You can do that. And by the way, I'll just show you the difference again. Like if you would have been on auto, if we went second table set, second right here, I wouldn't change this. I do recommend that you're on ask, but you can see you just have to down arrow a lot to eventually get up to 34 and so forth, and then you'll see your answers. Here's the problem. Alex will ask you eventually to plug in numbers like 100 and things like that. So that would mean you'd be scrolling a very long time. So that's why the ask mode is so much better. How do we get there again? You go to second window, and you just come down to independent, put your cursor over the ask, and then you're good to go. So look, talking about plugging in a big number like 100, that's exactly what we're going to see right here. Typing in the square root of x minus 5. Now, please watch out how you're typing this thing in. I'm going to go to right here. I'm just going to press clear. I'm going to hit y equals. You're going to have to hit square root of x, but notice that the minus 5 is not under the radical. This is a very common mistake. You have to hit the right arrow right now. Because if you don't, if you just hit minus 5 would still be underneath the radical. And then everything would be wrong. Okay? So, look, you go radical x, hit the right arrow, and then you go minus 5. And now what? Now you are ready to just go ahead and type in and see what's going to happen. You could type over things. Maybe some of you still have a number up there. Just type over it. You could go negative 11. That's not a real number. Now, by the way, kids could say, couldn't you just see that by plugging negative 11 in? You're going to be in trouble. Of course. Of course you can see that. You plug in negative 9. You can even do that by hand. You can see you're in trouble. That's not a real number. No. But now when you're plugging in a 0, it is going to work. Plug in a 0, you're going to get negative 5. Okay, so plugging in 100 is why you want to be on ask mode. The other option, here you plug in 100, you just get a 5. Otherwise, what you got to do is it's like doing 4 separate problems where if you were plugging that in, and some of you might say, I just want to do this, problem by problem, just type in the square root of 100 minus a 5, and then you get your answer. You can do that too. But the table will help you out. Okay, last type of problem means domain should be found. The domain is what x values are allowed. And guys, what you've just seen is sometimes you're going to get errors. What has to happen is the inside of your radical has to be greater than or equal to 0. So always take the inside and make it greater than or equal to 0 and then solve for x. Here you just add a 7. Your answer, what you'd have to type into Alex, is x greater than or equal to 7, and then you're done. Those are the x numbers that you're allowed to plug in. Anything that is smaller than 7 would get you an error. Okay? Last one, and then we're through. Here's where we've got to be real careful. Please realize that it's only the x underneath the radical. It's only the x. It's only what's inside the radical, guys, that you set greater than or equal to 0. There's nothing to solve here. You are plain and simply done. It's x greater than or equal to 0.